Hello, Mr. Grayling.
Hello.
So I have the pleasure to be here with you. You have been ex-Secretary of State for Transport between 2016 and 2019, so recently under government of Theresa May. Today there is quite an important event because the Member of Parliament will try to seize control of the Commons. So if it succeeds, potentially they will try to have to decide the legislation, and they could attempt to stop a no deal. So do you think that this could happen? And,
I mean, I find it difficult to see how you can stop no deal from happening. I don't want no deal. I don't think it's the best option for either the UK or the European Union. But if we cannot reach an agreement that our Parliament will accept, then either we stay in the European Union, which would be, in my view, hugely damaging to the democracy of the United Kingdom. We've voted to leave, we must leave. Or alternatively, we'd be in a position where there was no agreement. At some point we do just leave, because the legal default is we do leave. Yes. The challenge is that a majority of our members of Parliament today voted to remain, and the country voted to leave, and this division has been there right the way since 2016. And there are very many members of Parliament who simply haven't accepted the result of the referendum. It's genuinely not entirely clear what will happen next. I mean, I think there is a fair prospect. The Prime Minister has indicated that he doesn't want a general election, but clearly that is a possibility. Equally, legally it's not quite clear how this is going to pan out. But one way or another, this has to get resolved. And I don't think anybody sitting in Europe and in the European Union in Brussels should be thinking, oh, if we just kind of sit on the sidelines for long enough and don't talk to the British and don't reach a new agreement, they'll decide to stay. Yes. That's not going to happen.
How long have you been Eurosceptic?
Well, I think if you turn the clock back 20 or 30 years, I would describe myself as a pro-European. It's not me that's changed, it's the European Union that's changed. It has moved step by step from being a trading partnership between nations with some sensible alignment of legislation work, for example, like environmental laws that cross borders. Inevitably, what happens in one country can affect another, to effectively a political and economic union. The creation of the single currency, in my view, is an obvious step in the direction of political union. I don't think you can have a single currency over the longer term without political union.
No, because the economies are different.
Absolutely. And so, to my mind, during the referendum, I went to Brussels, I spoke at the Egmont Institute, and I argued the case for a federal Europe, because I think it's absolutely essential now. I don't think you can have a single currency without a single government. Yes. That's just not right for the United Kingdom. Exactly. I want to be good friends and good neighbours, but the decisions taken by the member states who have become part of the Eurozone, in my view, put them on an irrevocable path towards political union. And if the European Union becomes effectively a political union with a few other members sitting on the edges, then that's not where I want the United Kingdom to be. I'd rather we had control of our own destiny, but we're good friends and neighbours of countries like France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium.
And one idea we are trying to sell also to the French is that most of the time they are not necessarily happy with the policies of the EU, but they are not necessarily aware that because we are 28 members and we need the 28 agreements to change something, therefore we cannot change the EU really, so it's complicated. Unless...
that's true, except that the combination of the Lisbon Treaty and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which are both very loosely worded documents, and which are regularly used by the Commission and the Court to effectively centralise more power in Brussels. Actually, Brussels has plenty of power to do more and more and more if it continues to interpret different parts of what are currently national laws as in fact being a European competence. A good example is social security, where the Lisbon Treaty expressly says that social security is a member state matter, but actually decisions in the court have more and more made it a European matter.
Hopefully we will get out soon.
Well, what will happen is the United Kingdom will leave the European Union.
At some point,
it would be much better if we left with a friendly agreement with the European Union. Of course, there needs to be some compromise in that friendly agreement. But nonetheless, the United Kingdom has to have the power to take back control of its own lawmaking. It has to be able to take back control of the parts of our way of life which have been dictated in Brussels. What we then need to do is to work out with the European Union how best we make sure that the things we do alongside each other, the things we sell, the business we do with each other is compatible. Yes. You know, we actually manage to trade around the world perfectly well without having exactly the same standards in every country.
Exactly. And keeping the no deal on the table is something very powerful, I guess, to force Brussels to accept.
Well, the idea you can't take no deal off the table, because in any negotiation, if I want to buy a car from you, and I say to you, well, I'll give you £10,000 for your car, but in all circumstances, I'm going to buy your car. Whatever happens, I'm going to buy your car.
Yes.
You're going to say, well, I'm not going to accept £10,000. Give me 15. Yes. So, you know, that there is no negotiation that can work effectively when one side has already committed that whatever happens in all circumstances, they will do the deal.
Yes. Here, one of the topics which is often mentioned is the Irish backstop. So, first of all, do you see this as being a big issue? And if yes, what solutions do you think we can implement to avoid having a hard border again?
Well, I think in today's world, where business is done electronically, it really should be possible to have a border where people are not stopped. Let me give you a practical example. If you take containers that arrive from around the world into the European Union, 99% come through totally unexpected, unchecked. Why does anybody think that we need to check every vehicle that crosses a border, whether it's UK, France, or Northern Ireland to the Republic? Almost everything is done electronically. What you need is smart enforcement. So all anyone really cares about is anyone acting criminally in beating the system. Well, actually, if you're a criminal, you're probably not going to turn up at a border checkpoint. In a border which has thousands and thousands and thousands of little lanes crossing the border, you actually need mobile, technology-based enforcement. It should be perfectly possible in today's world to have a border, if both sides want there to be a border, which operates without checkpoints.
Yes. After you get out of the EU, do you think that short terms there could be still some troubles? Or?
Well, if we leave with a sensible agreement, it doesn't need to be at all. If we leave without an agreement, there may be a bumpy period. But fundamentally, the world carries on. We trade with countries around the world all the time, sometimes with trading agreements, sometimes not. Our biggest single country trading partner is the United States, with whom we have no free trade agreement at all.
Yes.
And so, but it's still perfectly possible to do business. So I think there may be a transition period with some difficult times, but there is no reason to think that if we don't have a trade agreement with the European Union, that things are going to be suddenly disastrous. But of course it's much better. If you believe as I do in free trade, then of course I want a free trade agreement with the European Union.
Yes, and also it's important to remind that the reality is that after the referendum, many planned the crash, and actually, so the economic situation is much better than in France.
Yes, so, I mean, the reality is that there's been lots of things said about how disastrous it was going to be, and it hasn't been.
How do you explain that it came first in your country? It could have been in Italy, it could have been in Germany. So is it because we are tied with the euro, with the history?
I think the British have always been a little semi-detached from the European Union. I mean, the vision of an integrated Europe is not here. And the truth is, I understand, if you live in Luxembourg, you work in Germany, and you do your shopping on a Saturday in France, all within a 20-mile radius,
yes,
of course you understand why people don't want different currencies and border checks and so forth. For the United Kingdom, it's always been different. We're an island, there's a different mentality, there isn't a kind of sense of desire to be part of a single European superstate. And there's been a frustration, I think, to see more and more things being centralised in Brussels that none of us ever intended to be centralised in Brussels. People in this country think they joined a European Economic Community, not a political union, but what they have is something that's taking on more and more of the characteristics of a political union. So I think it's about the national psychology.
But do the people realise the power that Brussels has on the politics of this country?
I think it's probably an emotional issue for a lot of people. I mean, no, of course, most members of the public don't understand the full range of European law. but there is a desire to do things closer to home, and a sense sometimes that some of the decisions taken in Brussels are frustrating and wrong. And, for example, nobody has ever been able to understand why the UK government has to pay child benefit to a child who lives in Poland who's never entered the United Kingdom.
Exactly.
If somebody comes from Poland to live in the UK and brings their family with them, of course, perfectly reasonable, they should receive child benefit. But a child who's never entered the country,
Yes.
that was one of the issues that nobody ever understood. You're right to say that there isn't an awareness of what's happening. I speak as somebody who's a free trader, but I think the European Union is fundamentally too protectionist, is not helping create a climate in Europe of economic growth. Unemployment in France is much too high. France needs a more dynamic, vibrant economy, and I think that liberalisation, reform is much easier and much more straightforward if so much is not controlled from Brussels.
Okay. So do you think maybe it will collapse automatically at some point?
The trouble is, it's not going to be good for any of us if it collapses.
Yeah.
So the challenge, William Hague, our former leader of the Conservative Party, once described the Eurozone as a burning building with no exit. And I think the challenge for people in France who want to leave the European Union is to find a blueprint that allows it to step aside from the single currency.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.